Hello guys, welcome back to the MMASucka podcast. As always, I'm Fraser Crone, and this one's going to be a little bit different because we're only going to look at UFC 299. The reason for that is that I'm actually away next week and won't have watched Fight Night Gassiev versus Rozenstruik. So I'm recording this on what is it, the 28th of February. It'll be released hopefully on the Monday of next week, which will be I think the 4th of March. Well, you know that already because you're listening to it. But yeah, so I this is being recorded on the Wednesday before fight week, because I wanted to make sure that I get the podcast out for you guys this week. So UFC 299, what a phenomenal card we've got on our hands. Um, what I will say is that it goes down from Miami. I'm going to jump into the main event, the co-main event, all three of the main card fights, as well as one on the prelims, and give a little overview of the prelims because on paper, I do genuinely think that this is the biggest card of the year. Obviously, UFC 300 is the biggest card of the year, but I think that this fight night, without this pay-per-view, sorry, without a doubt, is one of the strongest cards of the year. Headlined by none other than Sean O'Malley defending his bantamweight title against Marlon Cheeto Vera. Later on this week, I'll say later on this week, I've got an article out of essentially Sean O'Malley's keys to victory. Can he avenge the loss to the only man that's ever beat him, Marlon Cheeto Vera? Mentally, he's undefeated, as we know. He claims that the Sugar Commission has overturned the loss to Marlon Vera, but he did lose that fight. Was there an injury at play? Potentially, probably, but he did lose that fight. That was back at UFC 252. Let me just check what year that was. I think it was 2021. Um, let me just check. That was 2020, August 2020. So, it's both men have progressed on a lot since then, of course, especially Sean O'Malley, who's obviously gone on to beat Aljamain Sterling last time out with that pull right hand of his and capture bantamweight gold. Marlon Cheeto Vera actually lost his fight after that against Jose Aldo, and he's gone on to win a couple of big fights. Um, after that Jose Aldo loss, he knocked out Frankie Edgar. He dominated Rob Font over 5 rounds. He knocked out Dominic Cruz. He did lose to Corey Sandhagen, which is something I want to talk about a little bit later. But then he rebounded to beat Pedro Munoz last time out in August of last year. Does he deserve the bantamweight title shot? Arguably not. I think it should have gone to Merab Dvalishvili, who will inevitably get the next title shot. He's on a 10-fight win streak at the moment. But these two guys have got the history, Marlon Vera and Sean O'Malley. Jumping into the fight itself, I think Sean O'Malley has to stay in boxing range and not kicking range, because in that first fight he was kicked a lot by Marlon Vera, and obviously that led to the leg injury. I also do think that Sean O'Malley was knocked out in that fight when it did get to the floor. His head did bounce off the canvas, and you don't allow your head to do that if you've got, if you haven't had your lights switched off. But who am I to say that Sean O'Malley was knocked out? He has to keep it, like I say, in boxing range and not kicking range, although he is the taller guy with the longer reach. That means that he can stay in boxing range and try and stifle the kicks of Marlon Vera a little bit more. Marlon Vera does work well when he can put his combinations together, but he also is a fairly slow starter, Marlon Vera. I can see Sean O'Malley getting the first 2 rounds under his belt before Marlon Cheeto Vera's really ever, got going. With that being said, he's got the equalizer, Cheeto Vera, as we've seen against Frankie Edgar, as we saw against Dominic Cruz, that he can just shut people's lights out with his kickboxing. Where Cheeto Vera, for me, falls down is his grappling. He was dominated by Jose Aldo in the final round, which, essentially lost him that fight. He was dominated by Corey Sandhagen, excuse me, in the early rounds, which essentially lost him that fight. And that's an issue for Marlon Vera because Sean O'Malley's more than competent on the ground, and if he's going to win this one, I do think he has to mix in the wrestling of Cheeto. Mix in his wrestling and the grappling to just keep Cheeto thinking. That's kind of what Corey Sandhagen did in those first 2 rounds. He took him down, he controlled him for large periods of the fight, of those 2 rounds, sorry, over half a round's control time in both of those. And that kept Marlon Chito Vera thinking. It kept him debating when the takedown and if the takedown was going to come. And it essentially made him a little bit hesitant, which in turn, he picked up a pretty dominant loss. It was 49-46, 50-45, and I mean, a 48-47 in favor of Chito, I didn't see. He only threw 177 strikes in that fight, which is it's not a lot for Marlon Vera, taking into account that he only went, he went 4.5 rounds with Dominic Cruz and threw 160. The Rob Font fight, he threw 291 across 5 rounds. So his output's usually a lot better than what it was against Corey Sandhagen. I think that's because he was a little bit hesitant. He had to keep his hands just that inch or so lower because of the takedown threat. Can Sean O'Malley mix in the takedowns? We've never really seen it. We've never seen him go to the wrestling or have to go to the wrestling. We've seen his defensive wrestling a lot. We saw that last time out against Aljamain Sterling, but I can't imagine that Chito Vera is going to come out and try and wrestle him. These two guys don't like each other, which makes it such an interesting fight. If I'm Chito, I make sure that I start fast. I imagine Jason Perillo will be in his corner. I make sure he starts fast. At least gets one of the first 2 rounds, sorry, under his belt, because I think he will take over in the latter rounds. We don't know what Sean O'Malley's gas tank is like, and now against Petr Yan, we saw him go 3 rounds, and he was fatigued in that last round. As was Petr Yan. It was a really tough fight for both guys, but Sean O'Malley was tired after just 3 rounds. We didn't see him go last time out was the first time that he was scheduled for 5 rounds, and he knocked Aljo out. I think it was in the second round he knocked Aljo out. From what I can, second round knockout for Sean O'Malley. So, does he have 5 round cardio? Chito is famous for his chin. He's got 8 losses on his record, none of which have seen him be stopped. Sean O'Malley isn't a guy that loses a lot of fights. He's like I say, he's lost one to Chito. So I can see this one going the distance, and the later this fight goes, the more it benefits Chito. He has to up his output in the latter rounds. And if Sean O'Malley can stay with him when he sort of ramps up that output, then it could be a very entertaining fight. But we just don't know with Sean O'Malley. Like I say, we saw him fatigued after 15 minutes against Chris, or best part of 15 minutes against Chris Moutinho, when he was essentially just hitting a heavy bag. We saw him fatigued against Petr Yan over 15 minutes. Granted, that was a very tough fight, and we haven't actually seen his 5 round cardio because it wasn't needed against Aljamain Sterling. Like I said, for Chito Vera, he has to put a pace on Sean O'Malley early and hope that Sean O'Malley can't stick with him. Has to bank one of the first 2 rounds, because if he starts slow like he traditionally does and allows O'Malley to get at least 2 rounds up, O'Malley could mix in the wrestling, he could mix in the grappling, steal the fourth or the fifth round, and come away with the victory, despite being fatigued potentially. I can see this one going all 5 rounds, and I can see Chito Vera winning. I think it will be a very close fight. I can see both men bloodied. I think I can see Chito being rocked by Sean O'Malley, because Sean O'Malley hits hard for a 135er. My issue is that Chito hasn't looked great in his last 2 fights. His best performance as of late was for me anyway, was the Rob Font victory. Dominic Cruz outstruck him, but just couldn't handle Chito's power. 3 knockdowns for Chito, and then the 4th round TKO. Rob Font was the victory for me when he looked back to his brutal, precise best. And, he was outstruck in that fight, but he scored 3 knockdowns. He then looked very, very lackluster against Corey Sandhagen. He beat Pedro Munoz by unanimous decision, but with the respect given to Pedro Munoz for what he's done, he lost to Sterling, he lost to Edgar, he beat Jimmy Rivera, then he lost to Aldo, lost to Cruz, lost to, no contest with O'Malley, beat Chris Gutierrez, and then he lost to Chito Vera. So, it's not, Pedro Munoz isn't the elite level that Sean O'Malley's been beaten, to be honest. Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling are some of the most elite guys in the division. I just think Chito Vera really has to at least bank one of the first 2 rounds. I think that's going to be really important, that he does get one of those 2 rounds under his belt. And if he can do that, Who knows how the fight's going to go? I think it will go in the favor of Chito Vera by a decision, but the UFC are probably going to want Sean O'Malley to win it, which is potentially concerning. Moving on to the co-main event, Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis, the new guard versus the old guard. Dustin Poirier 29-8 and 0 with one no contest. Benoit Saint Denis 13-1 with one no contest. This is fireworks, this fight. Both guys southpaw. Saint Denis has burst onto the scene in recent times after losing his debut on short notice against Zaliki dos Santos. That was up at 170. He's obviously dropped down to his natural weight class now at 155. And he's never seen the final bell. What's his cardio like? We don't know. His last three victories: rear naked choke in the first round over Ismael Bonfim, TKO over Thiago Moises in the second round. He landed 101 significant strikes in over just 9 minutes in that fight, through 210. And then the guy that was meant to give him the most problems, Matt Favola, he knocks him out in just over a minute in, I think that was in New York City, UFC 295. Let me just double check. Yeah, it was in New York City. Phenomenal performance. He's the man in form. He's the young, hungry up and comer. Now you compare that to Dustin Poirier. Don't need to do any tape study on Dustin Poirier because we know Dustin Poirier. He's a solid kickboxer. He's a very good boxer with his hands. His kicking is coming on more and more each time that we pretty much see him fight. He hasn't plateaued. He's really implemented that low kick into his game, and we saw that in particular against Jim Miller back in we saw him receive low kicks against Jim Miller back in 2017. But we also saw him utilizing the low kicks against Conor McGregor in their, what would it be, their second fight, but the first fight of the sort of new era of their rivalry. He then obviously TKO'd Conor with the broken leg. But he's so experienced, Dustin Poirier. Like I said, he's 29, 8 and 1 no contest. So you're talking, this is going to be a 39th professional fight. He is coming off a pretty devastating loss, though. He's 1-2 in his last two fights. The one has come against Michael Chandler, who, is entertaining, but he's a balls to the wall type of fighter. He'll go out there and he'll defend shots with his face, looking to put on entertaining fights. And that's not always a bad thing. But then last time out for the BMF title, Dustin Poirier did lose. He was knocked out by Justin Gaethje. It can happen to anyone against Justin Gaethje because he's one of the elite guys in the division. But how much did that loss take away from Dustin Poirier? That was back in July of last year, International Fight Week. I think that might have been of last year. Has Dustin Poirier still got that dog in him at 34 years old, 35 years old? If there's one person that's going to test that, it's going to be the God of War, Benoit Saint Denis. He's the young, hungry up and comer. Just going to pull up the UFC rankings now and see where these guys are ranked, because Dustin Poirier has been in and around the top 5 of lightweight for as long as I can remember. Dustin Poirier is ranked number 3. Saint Denis is ranked number 12. This is a huge fight for the Frenchman. If he can beat Dustin Poirier, and if he can do it in style as well, that shakes up the division massively. He goes from number 12 and he has to go to, you're talking number top 5, maybe even takes Dustin Poirier's number 3 spot. For Dustin Poirier, if he loses this one, it's probably time to call the career, because if you're losing to the 12th ranked guy, we have to ask if you still got it to mix it with the best. Dustin Poirier does only lose to the very best in recent times. He's, of course, like I say, last time out he lost to Justin Gaethje. He lost to Charles Oliveira for the title back in 2021, and he lost to Khabib back in 2019. Before that, we had the sort of shock knockout over Michael Johnson, and then you have to go back as far as Conor McGregor's win over him in 2014. But his last 3 losses have come against Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, and Justin Gaethje, 3 of the elite guys at 155. Losing's a habit, though. Does he now know how to lose? Quite possibly. And I think where he sometimes struggles in fights is where fighters bring the chaos at him. Justin Gaethje, his fight style is chaotic. He's constantly putting a fist in your face or a kick on your leg. Um, Charles Oliveira is constantly walking forward. Yes, you might knock him down, but he's going to carry on walking forward, and then he might in a scramble he might be able to take you back and choke you out. He did well against Michael Chandler because he took Michael Chandler because he was able to sort of utilize Michael Chandler's you know boneheadedness, for want of a better phrase. But when Conor McGregor sat back and looked to counter with Dustin Poirier, Poirier picked him apart twice. Poirier was the man on the front foot, and Poirier was the man who obviously won those two fights. Dan Hooker, Poirier was the man on the front foot against Dan Hooker as well. If Benoit Saint Denis can meet Dustin Poirier in the middle and really put something on him early, I think Dustin Poirier potentially has to alter the way that he fights. We've never seen Benoit Saint Denis really have to sort of take a proper gut check, as it were. He's seen as this all round, all action mixed martial artist, the new guard versus the old guard, and I really can see Benoit Saint Denis getting it done and getting it done in style and potentially even stopping Dustin Poirier and highlighting a changing of the guard. But with that being said, we cannot forget who Dustin Poirier is. He's got wins over Anthony. The run that he went on after losing to Michael Johnson is one of the better runs in the UFC history. He lost to Michael Johnson, obviously, by first round knockout in 2016. He then defeated Jim Miller. He had a no contest with Eddie Alvarez. He beat Anthony Pettis. He beat Justin Gaethje. Let's not forget about that. He then rematched Eddie Alvarez and beat him. Beat Max Holloway. Faced Khabib Nurmagomedov. Lost that fight, but no one has faced Khabib and won. He then beat Dan Hooker, and then he was going searching for the money fights with Conor McGregor twice, which is absolutely fine. If you want to go down that path, if you've kind of almost decided that you're not really at that championship level, go down the Conor McGregor path. He got one more shot at gold against Charles Oliveira, didn't go his way. He returned for the fun fight against Michael Chandler. That one went his way. But then when he stepped up again to face Justin Gaethje in this new era of Justin Gaethje, he came up short. We forget the vast experience and the high level experience that Dustin Poirier has. He's he's Hall of Fame for me. The resilience that he's shown throughout his time in the UFC, the work that he does outside of the octagon, especially in Lafayette, Louisiana, where he's from, phenomenal. But is it just a time that we see the changing of the guard? I have a feeling it might be, and I have a feeling it might be done by finish. Benoit Saint Denis. Talking about changing of the guard, Jack Della Maddalena versus Gilbert Burns. This is a really interesting fight at welterweight because again, we have to ask the question: how much? Okay, I've skipped a fight. It fits the narrative. I'm going to talk about the Jack Della Maddalena fight in a second. I'm actually going to talk about the most interesting welterweight fight on the card. My apologies. Kevin Holland versus Michael Venom Page. Kevin Holland, 25 fights, 10 losses, and 1 no contest. Michael Venom Page, let me just pull it up because for some reason the UFC have got him undefeated, which is not the case. I know for a fact that he's lost twice. But I will just pull his official record up of 21-2. So I'm just going off what what the UFC have the fight lineup as on UFC stats. Topology have it slightly different, but the UFC have it obviously O'Malley and Vera at top of the card, the 5-round co-main event, Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis as the co-main, Michael Venom Page versus Kevin Holland as the third fight on the main card. Kevin Holland, like I said, he's got a record of 25, 10, and 0 with 1 no contest. Michael Page has got a record of 21 and 2. This one's exciting. This one is really, really exciting. It's the debut. It's the long awaited, highly anticipated, long overdue debut of Michael Venom Page. This guy should have been in the UFC when he was beating when he was smashing it in Bellator for my liking. He's 36 years old now. He won his last fight against Yamakuchi. If you remember, that's when he kicked Yamakuchi and his knee just instantly blew out. So we know how much power he's got. But he's essentially competed in MMA for 26 seconds since he lost the interim welterweight title shot to Logan Storley back in May of 2022. He did go, I think, 5 2-minute rounds against Mike Perry in a bare knuckle fight and lost that fight. He was dropped by Mike Perry. But, you know, he's not a bare knuckle boxer. He's an MMA fighter. That takes away, arguably, his best asset, his kicks. Kevin Holland coming off, you know, his strength of schedule was amazing. He's slowed down a bit now, and rightfully so, because he competed, I think, 5 times back in 2021. 2020. He competed twice in 2021, and he's traded wins and losses. Let me just see if he's ranked. He's ranked number 13 at welterweight still. And rightfully so, he's got that left hook knockout win over Santiago Ponzinibbio. He's got the Dar stroke win over Michael Chiesa, which is a phenomenal win when you consider Chiesa's grappling prior. He's got the split decision loss against Jack Della Maddalena last time out in that strange fight when it seemed like neither guy to me really wanted to engage. You're going to have to engage with Michael Venom Page. Nice little rhyme there. But if not, he will pick you apart from the outside for this is 15 minutes. I think people are underestimating just how good a striker Michael Venom Page is because he's been beating up and knocking out guys. He's got 12 wins by knockout. He's been beating up and knocking out guys in Bellator, but he can also wrestle. We saw him wrestle against Paul Daly, which at the end of the day, this is mixed martial arts. If he is, clipped by Kevin Holland, who has a crazy striking style himself, it's very much like a kung fu style that we don't really see anymore. We could see him wrestle. I don't think we will. I think if anyone's going to wrestle, it's going to be Kevin Holland or grapple at least. Maybe not wrestle. Maybe we'll see a little bit of sort of clinch work from Kevin Holland. He agreed with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson not to shoot for takedowns and whatnot, and that came back to bite him on the ass. And I think that fight was stopped. I can't remember. I know it went quite late, but I do, from what I remember, he retired on the stool after the 4th round. So if Kevin Holland's smart, he'll mix in the grappling at least. No disrespect, he's not smart. He probably won't mix in the grappling. He'll want to put on a show for the fans, which I'm not mad about at all. I really like Kevin Holland. I like the way he fights. I like the way he talks, and he's got Michael Venom Page has got the perfect opponent. And watch out for Michael Venom Page during fight week because at 36 years old, is Michael Venom Page going to be a UFC world champion? I really don't think so. Is he going to be a UFC headliner? I almost guarantee it. If he beats Kevin Holland, he will be a headliner of a fight night. And he's got a really good narrative to fast track his way to the top, Alex Pereira style, because he's English. An all English affair between him and Leon Rocky Edwards, London versus Birmingham. That sells in England. I can tell you that for free. We've seen plenty of domestic dust ups in the world of boxing in England. We've got one sort of brewing at the moment between Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall, where they have their rematch in Leeds in April. It sells. England versus England sells. We saw Tony Bellew and David Haye really go at each other. Dillian White and Anthony Joshua really go at each other. And we haven't had that in the UFC yet. There was potential with it with the likes of Nathaniel Wood and Lerone Murphy and Jack Shaw, but that hasn't really materialized. Darren Till never really had that English counterpart to kind of bounce off, as it were. Neither did Michael Bisping back in the day. Neither has Tom Aspinall, really. So this is the all English affair that fans could be looking forward to. But first, Michael Venom Page has to get through Kevin Holland. I think that he will. I don't think that we'll get a spectacular knockout that many people maybe expect. I think that it'll go to decision, and I think that Michael Venom Page will get his hand raised in that decision. Although he's coming over from Bellator and it hasn't always gone well for Bellator fighters, Michael Venom Page is slightly different. Keeping it in the welterweight division, obviously we know the fight that I'm going to discuss now because I accidentally said it earlier, but it's Della Maddalena versus Gilbert Burns. Again, like Dustin Poirier and Benoit Saint Denis, this is old guard versus the new guard and a potential changing of the guard. And I do think that this one is extremely interesting. Della Maddalena, obviously undefeated in the UFC, 16-2 is his overall record. Um, and Gilbert Burns is 22-6. Della Maddalena, like I said, undefeated in the UFC, lost his first. He's undefeated in 16 fights. He lost his first two fights, both via finish in the Australian promotion Eternal MMA. Since then, he's gone on a 16-fight win streak. It's worth noting for me that he's gone to a decision twice now, back to back, which is interesting. He started off his UFC career in phenomenal fashion. You know, he knocked out Pete Rodriguez after putting an absolute boxing clinic on him with that jab. He then finished Razman Ameev by a liver punch. He knocked out Danny Roberts. He dominated Randy Brown. Then he took he was scheduled to face Sean Brady. That one fell through. Josiah Harrell fell through. And then he fought Basil Hasif on short notice. And that one didn't go his way. He won the fight, but it didn't go his way. It didn't go nearly the way that he would have wanted it to go. And that was a tough, tough fight. Many people thought that Basil had won that fight. He didn't on paper. JDM did. Then he fought Kevin Holland. And like I said, it was a strange fight because it was almost like neither guy wanted to fully commit and fully engage. He takes on a man who is at a bit of a crossroads in his career, if you ask me, in Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is a strange one because we genuinely thought that he would be a real big welterweight contender. And of course, he did have the title fight against Kamaru Usman back in the day. He was knocked out in that one by Kamaru Usman before really Kamaru Usman's striking had really come along. He then beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And for my liking, he's kind of at the moment dining out on nearly beating Khamzat. Nearly beating Khamzat isn't beating Khamzat Chimaev at all. It's still losing to Khamzat Chimaev, unfortunately. Now, there's legitimate there's a legitimate argument that he did beat Khamzat, but he didn't on paper. Again, like JDM losing to Basil, he didn't lose to Khamzat. Sorry, he did lose to Khamzat. He didn't beat Khamzat. He returned. He finished Neil Magny. Hasn't aged that well because Magny hasn't looked quite the guy that he has previously looked. Then he beat Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal is washed, or especially was at that time. And then he took a fight against Bilal Muhammad. Now, I believe that fight that he took against Bilal was on short notice. Bilal was scheduled. Oh, maybe it wasn't. Maybe he was injured going into the bout, but he was definitely injured coming out of the bout. It went 5 rounds, and unfortunately for Gilbert Burns, he looked awful in that fight. He was dominated, and he wasn't even dominated where we'd all expect Bilal to dominate him in the wrestling game. Bilal didn't shoot for a single takedown. Gilbert Burns was dominated on the feet by Bilal Muhammad. It's probably Bilal Muhammad, maybe the Sean Brady win, but it's probably Bilal Muhammad's biggest win. He 50-45, 49-46, and 49-46, all in favor of Bilal Muhammad. Gilbert Burns had a lot of issues in that fight as far as injuries and whatnot are concerned, and fair play for him to take it. But he lost the fight and he's lost a lot of momentum since then. With that being said, he's taken almost a year out now. That was May of last year. Obviously, this card goes down on March 9th. But if you're being outstruck with the greatest and greatest of respect to Bilal Muhammad is nowhere near the striker that Della Maddalena is. We know what Gilbert Burns has to do. He has to wade in with big strikes because he is a powerful hitter. Ask Khamzat, he did rock Khamzat. He needs to wade in with big strikes and look to get the takedown and then look to work his jiu-jitsu game. It's not going to be easy. JDM has an 82% takedown defense. And he hasn't, been I'm just looking now. He hasn't. I'm not sure why it's only an 82% takedown defense because according to this, he I'm looking at the wrong column. Apologies. the only people that have taken him down, he was taken down by Ange Looser and he wasn't really controlled. He was taken down by Razman Ameev, and again, he wasn't really controlled. And then he was taken down three times by Basil Hassif. But if you look at, Basil shot for 20 takedowns and landed three. So, it's really worth considering that if Gilbert Burns can't get this one to the floor, I think he loses it, and I think he loses it in pretty spectacular fashion. It's going to be tough for Burns because JDM has got arguably the best jab in the division, possibly one of the best jabs in MMA today. If you look at his fight against Pete Rodriguez, I think that was his debut. He was constantly putting that jab out in Pete Rodriguez's face, and it wasn't just a range-finding jab. It was spiteful. It was he really looked to hurt Pete Rodriguez, and I mean he did. He knocked him out, and that all came pretty much off the jab. Gilbert Burns can't allow JDM to get his range and get his rhythm because he'll get knocked out. It's as simple as that. Fascinating fight, and like I said, potential changing of the guard. Gilbert Burns ranked number 4 at the moment. Jack Della Maddalena ranked number 11. We could see a massive shake-up in the welterweight division, especially with that fight going down, as well as the aforementioned Kevin Holland versus Michael Page fight. Welterweight could be all over the place by this time next week. As could bantamweight. We could see a new bantamweight champion, like I said, with Marlon Vera wins. And Petr, another changing of the guard fight. It's pretty much the third changing of the guard fight, potentially old school versus new school, when Petr takes on Song Yadong. Petr, let's not forget, it was the knee that kind of started the downfall of Petr. He was 15-1 when he took on Aljamain Sterling. That illegal knee, saw him lose his belt, which is extremely disappointing for him. But at the end of the day, you can't knee an opponent when they're down. He returned. He beat Corey Sandhagen in a really good fight, but then he lost to Aljamain Sterling via split decision. Then he lost over 3 rounds to Sean O'Malley. Then he lost and was dominated over 5 rounds to Merab Dvalishvili. I think the benefit for Petr in this one is that he's not facing someone like Merab. Merab landed 11 takedowns against Petr. He shot for 49 takedowns. 49 takedowns were shot on Petr, landing 11 at a 22% accuracy. So let's be honest, his takedown defense held up pretty well. That does kind of blow his takedown defense up quite a lot. Yes, he was taken down 11 times, but that was 11 out of 49. 78% of the takedowns were defended, which means that he got a takedown accuracy of 85%. I don't think he'll have to use that takedown accuracy as he takes on Song Yadong. Song Yadong is not a massive wrestler. He doesn't. He does train at a Team Alpha Male, and he has landed, takedowns in his career, of course, to great effect as well. But for me, Song Yadong kind of uses takedowns a little bit more to disrupt fights rather than to actually look to dominate on the floor. But we've seen him dominate on the floor before. Chris Gutierrez in the 4th and 5th round, he clocked up over 9 minutes of control time across those 2 rounds. Against Ricky Simone, he was shooting the takedowns. He defended all of 7 of Ricky Simone's 9 takedowns, kept it standing, knocked him out late. He carries power late, which is extremely important in a fight like this. It is only a 3-round fight, so Song Yadong can pretty much see this as a sprint. His only loss in his most recent 6 fights is to Corey Sandhagen, and that one came as a cut, the cut on the eyebrow to Song Yadong. And that was an extremely, extremely close fight. And again, he mixed in takedowns in that one. If Song Yadong is sensible, he doesn't stick in the pocket with Petr, and he tries to strike at distance. Now, if we compare the two guys' sort of reach and height, they're pretty much identical. 5'8" for Song Yadong, 5'7" for Petr. Both have a 65-inch reach. Both have a 65-inch reach. The output, again, both men throw a lot. 5.03 for Petr, 4.38 strikes landed per minute for Song Yadong. Accuracy, Petr slightly more accurate, landing 53%. Song Yadong down at 42%. But for me, what's really important is if I'm Petr, I make this a boring fight and get back in the win column. Petr Yan has not tasted victory since 2021. He's lost 3 straight. If he loses, 4 straight, that'll be he will have lost 5 out of his last 6 fights. And you've got to be asking if he's what kind of caliber fighter he is, with the greatest respect to Petr Yan. He's still highly ranked because he's still ranked number 4 despite being on a 3-fight losing streak. And the reason that he's ranked number 4 is because everybody knows that the skill that he has. The guys that have beaten him, one's a champion, one's a number 1 contender, and not one's a number 2 contender and former champion. So it's not like he's losing to anybody in the division. With that being said, Song Yadong is riding an extreme amount of form at the moment. He just went 5 rounds with Chris Gutierrez, pretty forgettable fight, but he dominated pretty much every minute of that fight. He then also went kind of 5 rounds with Ricky Simone. He knocked him out in that 5th round. Yes, he lost to Sandhagen, but he can put that down to it. Mentally, he can put that down to it being a cut. And then you've got to look at, the fights before that for Song Yadong. Marlon Vera, Julio Arce, Casey Kenny, all really good wins. He holds a win over Marlon Vera. So that's something to consider as well, maybe further down the line. We also have to consider that he's 26 years old, Song Yadong. Whereas Petr Yan, I think he's a little bit older. Petr Yan's still only 31. So the age factor shouldn't really, be too much of a talking point. But it will be. Not the age, but the experience, the older guard in Petr Yan, the new breed, as it were, with Song Yadong. I think it's an absolutely fascinating fight. How I'm speaking, I'd maybe lean towards Song Yadong, but I do think Petr Yan's going to get it done by a pretty boring decision. If he mixes in the wrestling, we know that he's got phenomenal trips. We know that he's really dangerous up close in the exchanges, and we know that he looks to often hit on the break with knees up the middle, with short elbows, with hooks, with uppercuts. I think that can maybe get Song Yadong into trouble a little bit, but Song Yadong has also got the equalizer of phenomenal power. So I just think this is going to be a really fun fight, and it's a really, really good fight to open up the main card. That fight comes just after a heavyweight fight, which has massive, massive implications. I imagine, I'm not sure, like I said, as per the UFC, UFCstats.com, Curtis Blaydes versus Jason Almeida is the prelim headliner. Tapology have it slightly different, but I'm going to go off what UFC stats say. This is a massive fight. Curtis Blaydes 17-4 with 1 no contest. Jason Almeida 20-2, but undefeated in the UFC. This is huge because of the implications that it has. We've got an interim heavyweight champion in Tom Aspinall at the moment, and I genuinely believe that the winner of this fight will face Tom Aspinall for the interim heavyweight title further down the line, maybe in International Fight Week. It's a really good fight as well. Jason Almeida, like I said, undefeated in the UFC, hasn't lost since 2018 in all of MMA, but made his debut knockout. Second fight finish. Third fight finish. Fourth fight finish. Fifth fight finish. Jairzinho Rozenstruik in the first round of their main event. Then, I'll be honest, really boring fight against Derek Lewis, but he did what he needed to do. Didn't get any fans exactly on his side. He landed 6 takedowns against Derek Lewis. 21 minutes of control time. It wasn't a good watch. I wouldn't suggest going back and watching it. 50-45, 50-44, 50-44. It kind of tells you all you need to know about Jason Almeida. Did he fumble it when he didn't really look to go out there and finish Derek Lewis? I think that he did. It is what it is. It's in the past now. He faces Curtis Blaydes in a massive heavyweight fight. Rankings-wise, Curtis Blaydes ranked number 5, Jason Almeida ranked number 7. Form-wise, of course, it's with Jason Almeida, as I'm alluding to now. Curtis Blaydes lost his last fight in the first round via knockout to Sergey Pavlovich. He hasn't gone anything over a round, anything over 3 minutes since 2022 when he knocked out Chris Daukaus in the second round. He obviously had that fight with Tom Aspinall, lasted 15 seconds after Aspinall blew his knee out, and he was knocked out, like I say, by Sergey Pavlovich. after 3 minutes of their fight night main event back in April of last year. He's had almost a year off, a good 11 months off. So that's really good after the knockout. That's what we want to see. This is a big, big fight for Curtis Blades because he's always been the nearly guy with the greatest respect to him. He's almost got a title shot and then he's lost a big fight. And then he's almost got another title shot and then he's lost a big fight. He went on a run of beating Alexei Oleinik by TKO, Mark Hunt by decision, Alistair Overeem by TKO, and then he lost to Francis Ngannou. Then he looked to rebound. He beat Justin Willis, Shamil Ibrahimov, Junior Dos Santos, Alexander Volkov, and then he lost to Derek Lewis. And then he beat Jairzinho Rosenstruik, then he beat Chris Daukaus, then he beat Tom Aspinall, and then he lost to Sergey Pavlovich. And it just feels like now he hasn't really got the momentum to really take him that step further and that step into the sort of championship level, because I genuinely do think the winner of this fight will face Tom Aspinall for the interim heavyweight title at some point later on in the year. Like I said, potentially International Fight Week. It's going to be really interesting because despite the fact that he's a heavyweight and he is a big guy, he weighed in at Jake Almeida weighed in at 236 pounds last time out. Now, Curtis Blades, let me just check what he weighed in at against Sergey Pavlovich. 262 and a half. So Curtis Blades is going to be the bigger guy in there by 30 odd pounds. He's got phenomenal wrestling. Curtis Blades, as we know, he's quite long. He doesn't get taken down an awful lot, Curtis Blades, which I think is going to play a massive factor, because if Jake Almeida finds himself maybe a round down, maybe 2 rounds down, he'll look to wrestle and to potentially submit Curtis Blades. I don't think he'll be able to do it because I think Curtis Blades is that good a wrestler. I'm leaning towards Jake Almeida just based off of pure young, hungry up and comer, needs to bounce back from that Derek Lewis disappointment. Yes, he won the fight. Let's not forget he did win that fight, but it was a quote unquote sort of boring fight, as it were. But we've got to take into account that every day of the week and twice on Sundays, this is a fight night headliner, and it's potentially finishing off the prelims. So that's just how good this card is. I spoke for a long time, 45 odd minutes on all of those fights. I'm just going to touch on the other fights. Caitlin apologies, Caitlin Chukagian, as was. She looks to come back from a disappointing loss last time out to Manon Fiorot in October 2022. So she's had a long time off, best part of a year and a half almost. She looks to return against Maycee Barber, the exciting up and comer Maycee Barber. She looks really good. She lost to Roxanne Modafferi with that injury. She lost to the future champ Alexa Grasso. Since then, she's riding a 5-fight win streak now, including a TKO finish over Amanda Hebas last time out. We could be looking, if Maycee Barber wins, at the next title contender in this fight. Really want to keep an eye on. And yet again, it's another potential changing of the guard fight. You've got, the older statesman in Chukagian, born in 1988, 10 years younger than her, Maycee Barber, born in 1998. Really fun fight at women's flyweight. I think I read somewhere that this fight is off. Rafael Dos Anjos, I believe, is injured. I just want to check that one because he's supposed to be facing Mateusz Gamrot. I'm not sure I read that right then. Maybe. No, I'm lying. RDA isn't out of that fight. Mateusz Gamrot versus RDA is phenomenal. Again, a fight night headliner that's buried right down on the prelims. That's a really exciting fight at lightweight. Gamrot, of course, coming off the win against Jalen Turner and it is a victory against Rafael Fiziev. It did finish due to injury. Rafael Dos Anjos is coming off the loss up at welterweight to Vicente Luque. It's clear that Dos Anjos is stuck between welterweight and lightweight. His last performance at lightweight was a knockout loss to Rafael Fiziev in July of 2022. Since then, he's competed twice at welterweight. So he's clear, he's in the twilight of his career, Rafael dos Anjos, but he's in between weight classes. We've got the always fun Michel Pereira. He returns. Who knows what's going to happen with Michel Pereira? Will he make weight? Let's hope he does, because if you remember, he didn't make weight against Stephen Thompson, and that led to a cancellation. He took on Andrei Petroski last time out and beat him in just over a minute. He takes on Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, who is coming off a win against Chidi. It's a really good win in the first round. Michel Pereira wins that one, I believe. Got Josh Partizan. I'm going to butcher the guy's name. I spoke about it roughly last week against Robelis Despergine. Again, I apologize. But this guy, he's got 4 wins, all in the first round, and his last 3 wins have not gone anything over 12 seconds. His last 2 wins is a 4-second knockout and a 3-second knockout. The win before that was a 12-second knockout, and his debut was a 4-minute 54-second knockout. I believe he was a kickboxer before joining the UFC. He's in it for the short run. He's 35 years old, so he's not going to be a veteran of the game. But if a guy's got a 12-second knockout, a 3-second knockout, and a 4-second knockout, it's going to be exciting. Again, he's facing Josh Partizan. Got Joanne Wood returning against Marina Moroz. Moroz obviously lost her last 2. Seems more focused on, I think she does OnlyFans now, or at least does modeling, so she seems more focused on that. And Joanne Wood, again, an older statesman of the division, but she's facing Moroz, who's also an older stateswoman of the division. And we've also, I didn't even know this fight was on the card, Philip Lins versus Ion Cutelaba. I think that one's a fairly short, a fight that was made on fairly short notice. But like I said, guys, the reason that I haven't spoken about the Rosenstruik versus Gassiev results is because I'm recording this on the 28th of February, so it hasn't actually gone down yet. I'm going to release a video as well, probably release it tomorrow on Tuesday. A little 10-minute video. That's why I haven't touched on it at all. I haven't even mentioned it. Francis Ngannou versus Anthony Joshua goes down this Friday night from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So that quick 10-minute video looking at that fight will go down on go up on the YouTube channel on Tuesday. But that's why I haven't mentioned it, because I want to do a little special on that one. But guys, thanks for listening. Use code SUCKA at manscaped.com as per usual. 20% off, free worldwide shipping. Use code SUCKA, SUCKA at manscaped.com. If you could all do me a favor, like this video, comment on the video, tell me who you think is going to win at UFC 299, and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you.